I'm Carrie Witt. I am the art director and cat whisperer of Owlchemy Labs. As you can see, my title checks out.
Owlchemy Labs just announced its latest project, which is Cosmonious High. And it's really quite out of the ordinary from what we've seen so far from Owlchemy. How did the team approach the visuals and concepts for this new project?
Right. So I guess from like the highest level concept, we really wanted to do something new for this new IP, this new game. And so much of the job simulator universe and vacation sim is based around kind of satirizing workplace culture, things that are fairly familiar for everyone in terms of pop culture. And this time around, we're like, okay, why don't we start with something a little bit less familiar? So space, aliens, high school being the kind of familiar touch point, but that kind of opened up a lot of possibility space for art direction, right? We're no longer recreating and satirizing very direct things from real life. It's more like, okay, let's make Alien feel somewhat more familiar, which is definitely an interesting art challenge, but very exciting on the art side on me, is being able to play with a lot of colors. And from a high level, we wanted to make this not a scary space, not, you know, we're not playing Alien here. We're not hiding from the aliens. The aliens are your friends. So kind of a more hopeful, utopic type alien space, using color palettes to lean into that, lots of playful gradients, and also kind of moving away from a lot of the art style from our previous games, which is kind of determined a lot by our resources and kind of limitations on the art side. Whereas this time around, we have more resources, more art staff. So taking a much more organic visual approach to the characters in the world.
Yeah, you have kind of this familiar, like, you're the new kid at school setting where everybody's like, what are you about? Where are you going to fit in here? And then you start getting like these superpowers, and everyone's like, the school's broken, fix it. And it's just so interesting and whimsical the way that it looked in that trailer. Just like, it's like, yes, you have like this alien space, but it's also got like this bubblegum pop color palette to it that's just so popping right from the get-go.
Yeah, thank you. I love playing with colors, especially in this VR space where it can feel so real. I'm like, I want it to feel like you're in some kind of living cartoon that's believable, but you're never going to actually exist in a space like that. And that's kind of the magic of VR.
With Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator and even Rick and Morty virtual reality, there's definitely this feel that Owlchemy has nailed down. And like, despite how quirky everything is, it still feels very sensible in its interactivity. Has that been a hard balance to find?
So I feel like a lot of the challenges in making things feel sensible and approachable in that way is through interaction design and all of the things we have in the world, which I feel like has always been somewhat of a challenge, and why it's really important to playtest with a bunch of different folks, because it's much more akin to industrial design than traditional concept design, right? You're not just taking your player character, moving them with the stick and pressing X to interact. You're using your physical meat body in this virtual space to interact with things directly. So it's always kind of a game of, you know, using best practices from industrial design and using visual hierarchy and cues there to kind of lead the player to be like, oh, it looks like this should be interacted with like this, and kind of accounting for those affordances. Or if it's clear that we screwed up and, oh, players aren't getting this, we need to try again. It's kind of a balance there between what seems interesting in a game space and what is actually possible for the player to do. So trying to balance that is always a challenge, especially in Cosmo High, because we're starting from baseline of alien and weird, right? We're not rebuilding like an office cubicle like we did in Jobson, where all the pieces and parts there are very familiar. This is more like, okay, let's take something really weird and try to add these visual components of stuff we're familiar with to make it approachable and understandable for the player.
Is there anything in particular that the team has learned from its previous VR games and experiences that feels like it's paying off in the development of Cosmo High?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like some of our biggest learnings in general come from playtesting and come into how we approach not just the intuitiveness of the designs of stuff and how we treat accessibility for closed captioning and all that stuff, all of our learnings to make our games accessible from the ground up. But I think specifically after Vacation Simulator, we realized, oh, wow, people really want to interact with the bots in a way that we haven't really had the space or resources to do, right? Like that was very intentionally part of the bots design. Like, don't have time for like locomotion or hands or facial expressions or any of this. We're just going to go with a screen. They're going to be floating, no problem. So in Cosmonious High, having these characters that are, you know, full-bodied, have multiple arms in some cases, can actually emote and react to you, and you have conversations with them, has been a huge new challenge. But it kind of seemed like a natural evolution from what we saw players wanting to do in our previous games, and that we saw kind of lacking in the VR titles. We really wanted to explore the depth of these characters and not just have them kind of be like set dressing that could say a funny thing or two, but actually be able to engage with them and be like, oh shit, these alien kids are actually really cool, and I'm forming an emotional attachment to this alien character. And it's weird because I haven't seen people in 2 years, but I'm bonding with this alien person, and this is great.
Job Simulator first came out in 2016, and in the time since that, like that first major Owlchemy game, the VR space has kind of exploded. Like we've had a huge amount of new headsets come out: the Oculus Quest 2, the Valve Index, the HTC is coming out with new headsets, and like the technology has expanded so much in just a few years.
Oh yeah.
How do you feel about the overall VR landscape in 2021?
It's really fascinating to me because I feel like kind of what we have with the Quest 2 in terms of accessibility and how it works is kind of what everyone was hoping for when VR first came out. I remember when I first got the Quest 2 and checking out that first experience with the little robot guy and you dance with, and I was like, okay, this is a really nice introduction to VR. And I think especially for folks who wouldn't consider themselves a gamer, is trying this out in VR is like, oh, this could be for me. This isn't just for other people. And I feel like there's a much bigger space for developers to see a path into VR at this point, because of the better affordability of the headsets now. It's still kind of pricey, truth be told, but the fact that we don't have to have base stations drilled into your walls anymore, and we have inside out tracking, and it is more affordable than it used to be, creates a much larger audience. And I think that opens up the possibility space for developers to be like, I'm going to throw my hat in this VR ring and try to make some cool experiences that I might not have otherwise tried.
It used to be mostly VR experiences, like, and not to say that there weren't VR games, that there weren't fleshed out games, but like developers are finally starting to bring narrative and characters and explorability into their VR games. And how do you feel about the influx of sort of this technology expanding the overall VR scene past those experiences and into like full-fledged games?
Right. So I feel like there is definitely a chunk of time that was like, let's get our feet wet in this medium and try to figure out the basics of what feels good. And I feel like a natural extension of that is like, okay, we're grounded now in VR. We understand like some probably shouldn't do's and probably should do's in terms of designing, that it's now easier to spend more time focusing on the narrative and characters. I think part of the reason why so much of the early stuff was focused on physical interactions, because that's kind of like the immediate win with VR, the immediate feel-good thing. Neat.
Hey, you guys said the first thing that people do when they turn on VR is look at their hands. I remember that's an interview you guys said that, yeah.
Yeah, just like the immediate like, holy crap, my meat body, but virtual, and like I have these weird glove like hands now. That's kind of cool. And once you get past that initial part, especially, you know, going back to what I mentioned about Vacation Simulator, seeing people want to connect with the characters more, and that being something that's been a bit lacking across the gaming landscape. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to focus on that for Cosmonious High and really dig into the things that do feel good with characters, where the bounds between, okay, this person is now in my personal space and I don't like it, or this feels weird, or this feels uncanny, to, oh, I put out my hand for a high five and I can high five this character and that feels good. And I think just part of that too is that it requires, I feel like, so much more effort on the development side to make those interactions and to make them feel good, just because there's so much else wrapped up in that in the VR space.
It's really interesting too, because like the way that the Oculus Quest's controllers are set up, the haptics on the controllers, you can actually feel the high five.
Yeah, there's something so magical with getting the haptic feedback of that. It tricks the brain. It's like, yes, this is a real new friend you've made and not just a Twitter friend.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything in particular that you're still hoping for VR to improve upon as it continues to expand, or limitations that you think we haven't crossed yet?
I guess going back to a point I was making previously, just in terms of affordability, and as the technology gets better, that's going to obviously help a lot and allow a bunch more people to both develop for VR and actually experience it, which I'm always so excited for. Seeing someone experience VR for the first time will never not be magical. Just kind of the opening of possibility space in their face and their brain when they experience it is just, it's very cool. But I guess outside of that, seeing the space kind of delve into more issues with accessibility and such, not just limited to accounting for players' physical limitations or height, but actually accounting for color blindness and captions, that type of stuff. The type of accessibility that we're seeing more and more in the traditional game space, having that more across the board for VR, I think is just great for everyone, because that just allows more people to experience this wonderful medium.
I think accessibility is a huge thing in VR. Like every single game that I first go into, the first thing I do before I even start playing is go look at its comfort options. It is very much a relief when I see that there's like a wide suite of things like motion sickness options, but also like changing dominant hand, changing motion restriction, sitting and standing gameplay. And it's very, very much like disappointing when I don't see that. When I see something missing from that.
Yeah, it is definitely disappointing to see for a lot of developers to kind of treat it as an afterthought. Like, okay, we'll make the game first and maybe we'll patch some of that in, rather than considering all of the things that you need to do for that from the ground up. And some of the approach that we take for our content, especially Cosmonious High, is to kind of build in a lot of that from the start and really leave the option setting for, I guess, very specific use cases, because making the game accessible from everyone from the ground up is just better for everyone. And it's no longer a game of, okay, well, what menu do I have to go through to see if this is even here? Like, does this game even include this?
Is there anything in particular that you really wanted in approaching your next project to make Cosmonious stand out from anything Owlchemy has done before?
Mm-hmm. I think the overall, I guess, range of depth of interactivity being a huge part of that. So much of what we did well with Jobs and Vacations and Rick and Morty is just the immediate gratification from physical interaction and direct physical interaction, right? Smacking stuff with the back of your hand, chucking it across the room at a character. And this time around, we really wanted to go deeper in those interactions, which is, why the player has these powers, right? What are other ways that you can give the player agency by letting them interact with their space in a way that's not just picking things up? So that was a huge one for us. And again, the interactivity for characters being a big one, and actually having that feel good and not like you're creepily being watched by your alien classmates and like, oh no, when is this going to flip and actually become a horror game and I need to get out of here? And I think the visuals being a big part of that too, like really expanding on what was possible in the previous game, since we do have the resources now, and being like, okay, cool, we've got dedicated tech artists. Let's do more with lighting. Let's do more with shaders. Let's just do more.
When is the tentative launch for Cosmonious High at this time?
We have not announced, I don't think, a time frame yet, so I don't want to misspeak there.
When it's done.
Okay. Right. And where can people find out more about Cosmonious High?
You can follow Owlchemy Labs on Twitter or our Cosmonious High account on Twitter as well, which I think is just Cosmonious High. We also have a website for the game, and we have a couple of trailers up on YouTube. So all over social media.